All right. So if you guys notice a lack of content here and there, it's not because I'm not interested in Star Citizen. We're buying and selling a house. We're building a house. We bought some land. And then every once in a while, I go and do something like this. It's awesome. Hello, YouTubers. This is noobifier. We just returned from a week in Colorado. Kurt had reached out for help with a build, but his plan was actually a real challenge. We're used to people wanting their systems to mirror their high-end performance road or race cars. It would make sense then that there would be also some people out there who would want to also mirror their high-performance airplanes. We've never worked with anyone who has an airplane, so it was a bit trippy. I had worked with Kurt for over several months to help decide what gear would work best. Everything was discussed from chopping off the front of a real plane and mounting it somehow to a platform, but what we eventually decided upon was going to be a proof of concept with the plan to scale much larger in the future. And if you think about it, there's a big difference between the cost of cars and planes. So when plane people think about stuff, it's on another level, which is really good and such a challenge. Budget is always a consideration when planning, but it quickly became very evident that Kurt expected and wanted the gear that mimicked the real thing. So the plan was set, and we would be testing the suitability and feasibility with a first build based on a S25, which is a system that we have a lot of experience with. We would achieve the correct seated geometry with the correct hand placement on the correct controls. His idea was for Kyle and I to use off-the-shelf parts as much as possible, but as we later found out, Kurt would actually encourage fabricating or even cutting into the brand new parts if it meant that that would be closer to perfect. For him, being able to log sim flight for his personal use was important. But Kurt also saw beyond just for fun and to the real teaching potential that sim at this level offers. It became more obvious once we spent time with him that our trip to Loveland wouldn't be the last, and his appetite to build more and more elaborate systems was so real. We explored many ideas and came up with a plan. For proof of concept, we would repurpose the wheel mount of that system to mount a Brunner force feedback yoke. We would have the matching pedals to go with it. The seat choice was fairly obvious with the sheepskin chair from Monster Tech, but Oliver said that he had just enough black wool to make one chair, which would become known as Stealth Sheep, and it looks really good in person. I wanted Kurt to be able to fly for hours and hours without getting tired or uncomfortable, so the sheepskin wool flight chair is more than up to the task. Despite VR being accepted as superior to screens, we still went with 55 OLED simply because of the universality that it offers. They would actually be better to train a wide range of people from first-time users and up to short or very, very long test flights. Triple screen would also help with physical buttons and tactile controls. The Garmin G1000 is a set of MFDs that are more and more common on more modern small planes. These are non-touch screens, but they're surrounded by the most common functions. The G1000 is your artificial horizon, is your navigation and communications. Real Sim Gear makes a faithful and functional copy of that system for Sim. I've never used it, but I felt it was perfect for Kurt. He owns and flies real planes, and there was a very good chance that the next plane that he buys would probably have one of these systems installed in it. It was quite impractical to fabricate parts for his build in advance at my shop, but Kurt said that we would have access to his workshop when we were there. We had a plan, the parts were ordered, and the parts started to arrive, so we booked flights and we were on our way to Loveland, Colorado to visit with Kurt, and it all fell apart. Friday, we were due to depart Ottawa at 9 a.m., which meant a very, very early rise. Things were good. We were through Homeland Security on our way to a short layover in Washington. As planned, we would arrive in Denver around 2 p.m. local, pick up a rental, drive for a little bit, and we would be in situation before sunset. But the flight was delayed and then canceled. We would miss our connector, and everything out of Washington was fully booked as it was a Friday. So we decided to go through Toronto instead. They pulled our bags off the plane. We were escorted back through the terminal, and this time Air Canada to Toronto with a big fat layover, about 6 hours there, and now we were arriving at 10 p.m. that night. Not at all what I had planned, and I felt really bad because I basically made Kyle wake up super early for a good flight, and then we wasted the whole day in Toronto, right? When we arrived in Denver, the rental was upgraded from a Corolla to a Mustang SUV, a Mach-E. I really enjoyed it, and it was really the first time that I have driven an EV. The car also has active cruise, but it has hands-free driving. I can confirm that at 11 p.m. on a Friday night at 75 miles an hour, when the navigation wants you to take the exit, you are the one expected to initiate that exit, regardless of being hands-free or not. The exits on hands-free was just a test, and I later found out that Kyle does not like scientific experiments at 11 p.m. at 75 miles an hour on unfamiliar highways. So that's good to know. Hotel shower bed up for 6:30, breakfast, hydration on site at 7:30 to meet Chuck at the hangar. Chuck met us because Kurt was unavailable for the beginning of the morning. He would open up as it was Saturday and give us the swipe card that we would use for the rest of the install. We were shown around and also introduced to Matt, who runs the fabrication workshop that was attached to the hangar. I underestimated when Kurt said in our meetings that there was a workshop in the hangar. My God, that building was not only one of the largest privately owned spaces that I've ever seen, it was super clean, painted white, and properly lit like a paint booth. The doors opened facing a runway, and of course it was also facing the mountains of Colorado. The location totally redefined my definition of suitable working environment. Due to the custom nature of what we were building, Kyle would end up spending a lot of time in the workshop designing and building parts as needed. Kyle is very modest about his skills. I was impressed with what he was able to build quickly, and he said that having the right shop makes it a lot easier. Day one, we did a quick scan to make sure that all the parts were there and that they arrived serviceable. The system was shipped from Poland in assembled form, so we tested it using a laptop. The seat was unpacked and assembled. Kyle designed and fabricated a seat mount based off the measurements taken from the real aircraft that was in the hangar, and it was really nice to have that as a reference. He also fabricated a pedal plate, which would be fabricated on day 2 from aluminum, and that would include a kick plate that was fabricated on day 3. And then Kyle also did up a custom plate to mount the yoke, and then used some profile to make space to mount the G1000. Throughout the day, I assembled the triple TV stand, and it's always difficult to convey how much time these processes really take. Individually, they seem very simple, especially as we've done it a couple times, and we usually plan for 8-hour days, but little things add up, which is why 8:30 p.m. on day 1, dinner, hotel, shower, bed, up for 6:30 for breakfast, and on site at 8 a.m. for day 2. The completed TV stand was attached to studs in the wall for stability, and then Kyle installed the MFDs onto the bracket that was made the day before. The throttle became a little bit more customized, we could say, with a saw to get it into the correct location. The plan for the future is now either to source a better part to start with or use this part as the donor to DIY something better. It might become either a custom full dash or just built into a smaller metal box. The parts of the PC were assembled. Triple 4K is best to drive at a good frame rate, so a 4090 was used with a 7950X 3D, 64 gigs of RAM, a pair of SSDs, 1200 watt power supply, all of that in a Corsair case. The PC would sit on a custom mount that was built onto the stand to keep the wiring short. In total, we would need 5 video display ports because of the pair of G1000 displays. And these can be used with a USB to video adapter, but a second graphics card would work better and likely be more reliable. Running the small screens wouldn't need very much rendering power, so we went for a very low profile, low power workstation graphics card. The plan was to configure the triple array and then plug in the 2 smaller screens, but due to the 4-slot size of the 4090, I would need to research for a motherboard that had a x16 PCI slot at the lower edge of the motherboard. It was now 9 p.m. on day 2, so dinner, hotel, shower, back up at 7 for breakfast, on site day 3 at 8 a.m. The 55-inch screens were mounted generally in place. Wiring was and always is a major time sink. It was a bit more complicated with the screens, but we kept things loosely bundled with Velcro until we could test it properly. Kyle fabricated some brackets to hold the switched power bar from the platform. The operating system was installed onto the PC, and the plan was to update drivers, install Steam, install games that night, and let that run over the night. Due to a couple problems and building on the fly, our time got chewed up, and it was now 10 p.m. before we knew it. So we left knowing that tomorrow was the last day that we had in Colorado, up at 7 for breakfast and on site at 8. Day 4, crunch day, final checks, cleanup, but always the most important would be to get Kurt into the system. And then based on his feedback, all of the controls would have their axes tweaked closer to the real thing. A lot of time would also be chewed up setting up the G1000 as this was new and a total unknown. Luckily, the software was easy to configure for the screens, and there was even a plugin, so none of the 105 or so buttons needed to be bound manually, which was a solid win. Over time, we adjusted how the motion system behaved. Some parts were too strong, such as the bumpiness of the taxi on the runway, so those were culled. Others needed to be stronger, such as the speed of the motion for roll. It was getting really late, but we were feeling really good. We went through a full power down and a power up. We then spoke about the possibility of a future solo visit in the very near future, where I would return to further refine the system, do a couple tweaks here and there, and define possibly the next system for Kurt. Hotel at 11:30, up for 2 a.m., rental drop-off by 3, checked in through security, Denver to Washington, Washington to Ottawa, another successful visit. Each visit presents a new challenge and an opportunity for more in the future. Throughout the build, and especially later as the system was coming together, there was more interest from pilots in the hangar and, of course, the crew who also work in that hangar. We already know Kurt has an appetite for more, and I would not be shocked to get a call from someone who saw that system in the hangar and then wanted to discuss something more specific for themselves. So, if you made it to the end, thank you very much for spending your time with me. We had such a great time visiting with Kurt. He's super chill, and at the same time, because he has a clear plan for what he wants, it becomes very easy to build towards that plan versus what we would normally do, which might be trial and error. We had a great trip, and I hope you liked the behind the scenes. Reach out if this is the kind of thing that you might like for yourself. We might be able to help. Stay tuned for more. Fly safe.